Last year, players like Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, Devon Achane, Nico Collins were hidden gems in fantasy drafts that ended up exploding in 2023. Here's 7 players I think could do it this year. If you can't wait to start drafting fantasy football teams, you don't have to. Underdog Fantasy has drafts with entry fees as low as $4 and prize pools up to $15 million. And of course, their flagship Best Ball Mania 5, where someone will win over $1 million. Plus, if you sign up and use promo code ENDGAME, you'll get a special pick that you can use to potentially win 325 times your entry. And you're going to get up to $250 in bonus cash. Don't wait. Go join Underdog Fantasy now and use promo code ENDGAME to get your special pick and cash. Let's start with a rookie running back out in Los Angeles. Nope, not Blake Corum. I'm going with Kimani Vidal of the Chargers. I know we've talked a lot about this offense, about this running game, and we've talked a lot about Gus Edwards. And I like Gus Edwards, but I think Gus Edwards is going to be who he is. He's going to be the early down, short yardage kind of back, goal line back. But they're going to need a change of pace, pass catching back, and that is going to be rookie Kimani Vidal because he was very good at it in college, and he's also a very good pass protector, so that won't be an issue for him. He will be out there on third downs. In college, he had 92 receptions for over 700 yards, and he also had over 4,000 rushing yards on almost 800 attempts, so he can also run the football. He's not just this one-trick pony, pass-catching running back only. And we've talked about it a lot. Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman, they bolstered the offensive line. They kind of ignored wide receiver. They're telling us what they want to do. They want to use the running game. They want to use these running backs. And it can't be all Gus Edwards. It won't be all Gus Edwards. Kimani Vidal is going to have a role. He's getting a lot of hype right now already in preseason. And look, once OTAs, training camps, and that gets rolling, I think he's going to get even more hype. But most people in your fantasy leagues have probably never heard of Kimani Vidal because he wasn't one of the top prospects. He got drafted in round 6, so it wasn't like he went in the first round. Nobody in your league is going to know who he is. Just like last year, a lot of people in your league probably didn't know who Kyron Williams or Devon Achane were. But I really think Kimani Vidal can be a guy who's good from day one, even if Gus Edwards does what we think he's going to do, 800 to 1,000 rushing yards, double-digit touchdowns. There is enough meat on the bone in this offense for Kimani Vidal to be more than just a pass-catching running back. He'll also get carries. But look, if he ends up outplaying Gus Edwards, or if Gus Edwards gets hurt, he could have a much larger role as the season goes on, and he's got the talent and the ability to do it. And oh, by the way, please don't talk to me about J.K. Dobbins. In 3 years, this guy has torn an ACL and an Achilles. I don't expect anything from J.K. Dobbins this year. It's going to be Gus Edwards. It's going to be Kimani Vidal. I like Gus Edwards, but don't sleep on Kimani Vidal either. He can be a hidden gem in fantasy drafts this year. As could second-year tight end Luke Musgrave, going very late in fantasy drafts, pretty much in most fantasy drafts not even being drafted. But I think Luke Musgrave has the potential to be one of those late-round, undrafted tight ends that ends up becoming an every-week set-and-forget tight end. I'm not going to say he's going to be a league-winning tight end. I don't think he's going to be a top 5 tight end. But I could see him being a top 10 tight end this year for a guy you get with your last pick or off of the waiver wire. That is going to be absolutely massive for your fantasy team. When you look at last year, before his week 11 injury, which didn't completely end his season, but pretty much ended his season because even when he came back towards the end of the season in the playoffs, he really was not playing a lot of snaps. But you look at it from weeks 1 through 11 when he was healthy, he had 4 or more targets in 7 of his 10 games because they did have the bye week. And he also had 6 red zone targets. He was the clear preferred pass-catching tight end option over Tucker Kraft. And look, going into last year's draft, a lot of people had Luke Musgrave as the number 1 tight end prospect in that class. He's a good prospect. He's a talented player, and he didn't even get to play with the best version of Jordan Love very much. Remember last year, Jordan Love was awful to start the season, and then in the second half, he got going, looked like a franchise QB. We expect that to continue going into 2024, but Luke Musgrave didn't get a lot of that Jordan Love. This year he will. Now I know people are going to say, well, there's a lot of mouths to feed here, and you're right, there are. We like some of the Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Doubs is okay, but I don't think it matters as much for Luke Musgrave because, again, he's a tight end. You're not looking for Luke Musgrave to give you 20-plus fantasy points week in and week out. If Luke Musgrave becomes a red zone threat with touchdown upside, who gets 4-plus targets a game, is involved in the offense, for a guy you didn't even draft that you got off waivers, that's going to be great in fantasy because that's pretty much all it takes to be a top 10 fantasy tight end. Let's go back to a couple of rookies at wide receiver, starting with Troy Franklin of the Denver Broncos. It was pretty surprising to myself and a lot of people that he fell so far in the NFL draft, went very early in round 4, but he landed in a fantastic spot with the Denver Broncos reuniting him with his college quarterback, Bo Nix. And look, the last year these guys played together, which was last year, he had 1,383 receiving yards and 14 touchdowns. And I do like this landing spot for him, not only because the Broncos made it a priority to get him, but also because he's probably going to fill that Jerry Jeudy slot role. Jerry Jeudy now gone. Yeah, you got Courtland Sutton there, but I mean, Courtland Sutton is what he is, right? He's a red zone threat, a deep threat, basically contested catch guy. He's not a guy that's going to command a ton of targets. Marvin Mims, just a burner. Troy Franklin is an athletic freak wide receiver. He can man that slot, which means he'll get the softer matchups in the NFL, which is good for him. And look, maybe I don't believe Sean Payton is the offensive guru genius that a lot of people hold him up to be, but he's still a good, smart offensive mind. He's going to know how to get this guy involved, and having his college quarterback is just going to make that transition easier because these guys are already used to each other. Now, I'm not going to say Troy Franklin is going to have a Puka Nacua season. I mean, look, no rookie is going to have a Puka Nacua season. I mean, maybe like Marvin Harrison will do it, but even that feels like a stretch. That was a once-in-a-generation type of season. But I think Troy Franklin could have a Rashee Rice type of season, right, where he has a good season, not an incredible season. Rashee Rice last year, about 900 yards, didn't score a ton of touchdowns. But look, if he gets you that 900-ish yards, 6 to 8 touchdowns, that's going to be fantastic for a guy that you're probably just going to add off the waiver wire. And now a rookie wide receiver that's kind of the opposite of Troy Franklin. I mean, he also is going to probably play the slot in the NFL, but he's a big dude. That's Malachi Corley of the New York Jets. This guy is 211 pounds, going to play the slot in the NFL. And what I loved about Malachi Corley as a prospect, no, he's not one of these polished route runners. He's not one of these guys that, is a wide receiver technician that I think is going to, just eat up targets in this offense, because that's not what's going to happen. He's a dude that actually loves to truck DBs. Like, he is looking for contact. He is looking to run people over. Because, again, he's 211 pounds. There's not a lot of corners out there as big as Malachi Corley. And I love this landing spot for him for 2 reasons. Number one, on draft day, obviously not the first day, not day one, but on draft day, the Jets GM and head coach Robert Saleh texted each other that morning and said, Malachi Corley, no matter what. That means they had their eyes on this guy. This is the guy they wanted. That means they have a role for him. They see something in him that they think he can be a part of this offense right away. So you got to love that. But also, I think this is the type of player a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers is going to absolutely love. Because this is a guy that when you're in trouble, when you need somebody to do something, you can just get him the ball and let him go. He's a yard after catch monster, a broken tackles monster. He's like Kadarius Toney if Kadarius Toney wasn't made out of complete glass. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to love this guy because when the pocket's breaking down, when Garrett Wilson is not open, when Mike Williams is struggling off of ACL, he's just going to look for Malachi Corley, check it down to him, and let this guy rumble for 10 plus yards on his own. Love this landing spot for Malachi Corley. I love the player fit for this offense. I think Malachi Corley is going to surprise a lot of people, and there's going to be some point in this fantasy season where Pierre is dropping his waiver wire column and he's saying, you got to go out and add Malachi Corley, but you won't have to because you watched this video, so you're going to draft him, right? All right, let's get to some vet wide receivers now, and I want to start with Demarcus Robinson of the Los Angeles Rams. Had a great finish to the season last year, and I don't think people realize how close he and Cooper Kupp were in terms of production down the stretch. From Week 14 through the NFL playoffs, I'm going to exclude Week 18 here because the Rams rested their starters in Week 18, but during that stretch, he had 35 targets, 20 receptions, 308 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Cooper Kupp over that stretch had 45 targets, 29 receptions, 332 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That's not a major difference between Demarcus Robinson and Cooper Kupp. Now, before you say, hey, you're just cherry picking certain weeks here, no, I'm cherry picking these weeks because these were the weeks where Demarcus Robinson finally started playing significant snaps, played over 70% of the snaps. The Rams finally felt comfortable putting him into the game plan, putting him into the offense, and it paid off. I think going into 2024, we're going to see a lot of Demarcus Robinson. I think this is going to be more like a 2A, 2B between him and Cooper Kupp. Yes, Puka Nacua is going to be the clear number 1, but I don't think Cooper Kupp is going to be the clear number 2. I think it's going to be a lot closer than people think. And look, Cooper Kupp is over 30 years old. Cooper Kupp has battled injury 2 years in a row. What if Cooper Kupp misses time again, which doesn't seem that far of a stretch right now? If Cooper Kupp misses time, Demarcus Robinson is the clear number 2 wide receiver in this offense, and we've seen it the last 3 years. The 2 years that Matthew Stafford was fully healthy and Sean McVay was there, this offense rolled. There's no reason to think Stafford won't be healthy. Sean McVay is still there. This offense is probably going to be one of the pass-heaviest offenses again. It's probably going to be one of the fantasy friendliest offenses again, and there's a good chance that Demarcus Robinson, at least for stretches of the season, is the clear number 2 wide receiver, if not the 2B, even when Cooper Kupp is healthy, and you can get this guy free in all of your fantasy drafts. Speaking of another wide receiver that's free in your fantasy drafts, how about year 2 wide receiver Michael Wilson of the Arizona Cardinals? This is one of our rookie sleepers last year. Never really got going. Obviously, the first 2/3 of the Cardinals offense was a disaster with Kyler Murray out. But even when Kyler Murray came back, never really got it going. But he showed the kind of signs you want to see from an outside wide receiver. We talk about Matt Harmon and the work he does at reception perception a lot. He does a lot of great work over there. Michael Wilson last year cleared the 70% mark against man and press coverage, which is one of the best indicators of long-term success for an outside wide receiver. And in fact, Matt Harmon compares him to Michael Pittman, says he's kind of a poor man's Michael Pittman, but a lot of same game as Michael Pittman. I know Marvin Harrison's going to get all the hype as he should, but don't sleep on Michael Wilson very late in your drafts. Hollywood Brown is now a Kansas City Chief. Rondale Moore is now an Atlanta Falcon. They're going to need another wide receiver. It can't just be Marvin Harrison out there doing everything. Not to mention, Marvin Harrison going to draw the tougher coverage, which means Michael Wilson is going to face a lot of number 2 corners this year. Just because he had a down rookie year doesn't mean it's completely over for Michael Wilson. There's still potential for this guy. I still think he's a good player, and he's in a great offense attached to what hopefully will be a fully healthy Kyler Murray this year. So Michael Wilson, another guy I think you need to grab late in your fantasy drafts if you can. And then you want a real hidden gem? How about another year 2 wide receiver? That is Cedric Tillman for the Cleveland Browns. This is another rookie that I liked as a sleeper rookie and did almost nothing in year 1. But there's a lot of talk coming out of Cleveland that he's leapfrogged Elijah Moore as the number 3 wide receiver in Cleveland, which is a good thing because the Cleveland Browns ran the 11th most 3 wide receiver sets in the entire league last year. That means he's going to be out there a good portion of the time. Now, of course, the worry here is still the offense and specifically Deshaun Watson, because we haven't seen the Deshaun Watson we saw in Houston since he left Houston. But if he can put it together this year, if he can at least be good enough, there is a path here for Cedric Tillman, because again, the Browns run a ton of 3 wide receiver sets. It sounds like he's going to be the guy out there in 3 wide receiver sets. I liked what he brought to the game out of college. He was a much more polished, prototypical wide receiver than Jalen Hyatt, his teammate. I thought he was going to transition to the NFL much better than Jalen Hyatt would. We'll see. The jury is still out on both of these guys. But knowing he's already leapfrogged Elijah Moore, and the only guy standing in his path for him being out there in 2 wide receiver sets is Jerry Jeudy, gives me some hope that maybe we're going to see Cedric Tillman have a much more expanded role in this Browns offense this year. And look, if Deshaun Watson finally puts it together this year and isn't completely horrible, maybe that's enough for Cedric Tillman to explode in 2024. So those hidden gems are ready to explode in 2024, but who are the top 10 players ready to bounce back that you must have this year? Well, you can find out in this video right here.